It was the day of my grandmother's will reading, and I never expected to hear my father say it out loud. "You're too useless to inherit anything." The words hit me like a slap across the face. My husband Mark stood beside Dad, nodding slowly like he agreed with every syllable. I felt my chest tighten as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me in that stuffy lawyer's office. The air conditioning hummed, but sweat still gathered at the back of my neck. My father's face was stone cold, no regret, no hesitation. Just disappointment carved into every wrinkle around his mouth. Mark wouldn't even look at me. He studied his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. These were the two men I'd supported my entire adult life, and they'd just thrown me away like yesterday's newspaper. My grandmother's funeral had been 3 days ago. Her body wasn't even cold yet, and here we were, fighting over what she left behind. I'd spent the last 15 years being the good daughter, the supportive wife, the one who showed up for every family dinner and never complained. And this was my reward. I ran out of that conference room so fast I nearly knocked over the water cooler. My heels clicked frantically against the marble floor as I pushed through the heavy glass doors. Outside, the afternoon sun was too bright, too cheerful for how I felt. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted to escape my chest. Tears blurred my vision as I fumbled for my car keys. How could they say such things to me? Dad's voice kept replaying in my head over and over. Too useless to inherit anything. Each word felt like a tiny knife, cutting deeper every time I remembered them. My hands shook as I finally got my car door open. I sat in the driver's seat, not even turning on the engine, just crying into my steering wheel. The only person who ever truly believed in me was Grandma, and now she was gone. She'd always told me I was special, that I had something important inside me waiting to bloom. But without her voice encouraging me, I felt completely abandoned. Dad had never hidden his disappointment in me, but Mark's silence hurt even worse. That night, my sister Emma showed up at my door with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. She didn't wait for an invitation, just walked right in and started unpacking food on my kitchen counter. Emma had always been the perfect daughter, the one Dad constantly praised for her law degree and her perfect marriage. I expected her to defend Dad, but instead she hugged me tight. "I saw what happened today," she whispered into my hair. "That was wrong. Really wrong." We sat at my kitchen table, eating cold noodles straight from the containers. Emma told me she'd been watching Dad treat me differently for years, and she'd stayed quiet because she didn't want to rock the boat. "But today crossed a line," she said, stabbing a piece of broccoli with her fork. "There's something you need to know about Dad." She explained that he'd been struggling financially for months, making bad investments that drained his savings. He needed money desperately, and he'd been counting on Grandma's inheritance to save him. Emma's eyes were serious when she looked at me. "I think there's more to his cruelty than just pride." We gathered at the lawyer's office again the next morning. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning all night while Mark snored beside me, completely unbothered. The same conference room, the same uncomfortable chairs, the same family members whispering and avoiding eye contact with me. My stomach felt like it was full of rocks. The lawyer, Mr. Peterson, was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He opened Grandma's will with careful fingers, like it might crumble into dust. As he read through the usual bequests, everyone leaned forward in their seats. Cousin Rachel got the china set. Uncle Tom received the old Chevy. Aunt Linda inherited Grandma's jewelry collection. Then Mr. Peterson said my name, and the room went silent. My stomach dropped to my feet. I'd been written out of most of the inheritance, just like Dad predicted. But then Mr. Peterson kept reading, and his voice got quieter, more deliberate. There was a twist. Grandma had left me something far more valuable than anyone expected. My father's face went pale. Mark finally looked at me. Grandma's will revealed something nobody saw coming. She'd left me the family heirloom property, a beautiful piece of land that had been in our family for 4 generations. 100 acres of rolling hills, old oak trees, and a stream that ran clear even in summer. Everyone knew about the land, but nobody talked about its value. Real estate developers had been trying to buy it for decades, offering millions. Grandma always refused. The land was priceless, worth more than everything else in her estate combined. But there was a catch that made everyone in that room sit up straighter. I couldn't touch the land or sell it unless I completed a set of personal challenges Grandma had outlined in a sealed letter. Mr. Peterson handed me the envelope with my name written in Grandma's shaky handwriting. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "She can't do this. There must be a way to contest this." But Mr. Peterson just shook his head calmly. "The will is ironclad, sir. Your mother was very specific about her wishes." I held that envelope like it was made of gold. I waited until I got home to open Grandma's letter. My hands trembled as I broke the seal, and her familiar lavender scent drifted up from the paper. She'd sprayed her perfume on it, just like she used to do with birthday cards. Her handwriting was shaky but readable. "My dearest girl," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I imagine your father isn't being kind. He never understood you like I did." My eyes filled with tears as I read her words. She'd written out 5 challenges, each designed to test my independence and strength. The first challenge was simple but terrifying. I had to start my own business from scratch within 6 months, with no financial help from anyone in the family. "You've spent your whole life supporting others," Grandma wrote. "Now it's time to support yourself. Show them what you're made of." Dad's harsh words echoed in my mind as I realized what she was doing. This was Grandma's way of teaching me self-reliance, of proving I didn't need anyone's approval or money. I had no business experience, no savings of my own, no idea where to even start. But I couldn't back down now. Grandma believed in me enough to bet her most valuable possession on my success. I spent the next 3 weeks researching everything I could about starting a business. My laptop became permanently attached to the kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks full of ideas and crossed-out plans. I barely slept, barely ate, just consumed every article and video about entrepreneurship I could find. Mark thought I was wasting my time. "You're not a business person," he'd say while eating the dinner I'd reheated for him. "Why don't you just give up and let your dad handle the land?" But that just made me more determined. My father wasn't much better. He called every other day, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Have you come to your senses yet?" he'd ask. "You know you can't do this. Just sign the land over to me, and I'll give you a small percentage when I sell it." His words stung. But they also fueled something in me I didn't know existed. I finally settled on a business idea. Handmade organic skincare products, using recipes Grandma had taught me when I was little. She'd made her own lotions and soaps, and people always asked where she bought them. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn her legacy into something real. Just as I was starting to build momentum, everything collapsed. I'd spent weeks developing my product line, testing recipes in my kitchen until it smelled like a lavender factory. I'd even gotten my first small investor interested, someone from my old college who believed in my vision. Then Mark pulled the rug out from under me. He came home one evening, loosened his tie, and dropped the bomb casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "I talked to my parents about your little business thing," he said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "We all agree it's a waste of money. I'm withdrawing my financial support." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "But you said you believed in me. You said you'd help." He shrugged, taking a long drink. "That was before I realized how foolish this whole thing is. Your grandmother's challenge is impossible. You're not a businesswoman. You're a housewife." The words hit me like physical blows. I'd been relying on Mark's support, both emotional and financial. Without him I had almost nothing. My savings account had maybe $2,000. That night, lying in bed beside him, I remembered Grandma's words. "Do it on your own." Just when I thought I was completely defeated, my phone rang. It was Sarah, an old friend from college I hadn't talked to in years. We'd been close once, before life pulled us in different directions. "I heard about your grandmother," she said, her voice warm through the phone. "And I heard about your business idea." I was confused about how she knew until she explained that Emma had mentioned it to her at a mutual friend's party. "I want to invest," Sarah said simply. "No strings attached. I believe in you." I was immediately suspicious. Why would someone I barely kept in touch with want to invest in my untested business? "Because I remember who you were in college," Sarah explained. "Before you spent all your energy taking care of everyone else. You were brilliant, creative, unstoppable. I want to help you find that person again." She offered me $15,000 to get started. It wasn't much in the business world, but it was everything to me. We met for coffee the next day, and Sarah handed me a check with a smile. "Prove your dad wrong," she said. "Prove Mark wrong. But most importantly, prove to yourself that you can do this." The next few months were a blur of hard work and constant doubt. I turned my garage into a production space, buying equipment and ingredients with Sarah's investment money. Every morning at 5, I'd wake up and start making batches of lotion, soap, and face cream. My hands were constantly dry from washing them between batches, and I smelled permanently like peppermint and rose oil. Meanwhile, my father's harassment got worse. He'd show up at my house unannounced, walking through my garage workspace like he owned it. "This is pathetic," he'd say, picking up bottles of lotion and putting them down carelessly. "You're playing with craft supplies while sitting on a fortune. Just give me the land." He'd lecture me about how unqualified I was, how Grandma made a mistake trusting me with anything valuable. His words felt like weights on my shoulders, trying to push me down into the ground. But something strange happened the more he pushed. Instead of crumbling, I pushed back harder. Every time he told me I'd fail, I'd work an extra hour. Every time Mark rolled his eyes at my little hobby, I'd perfect another product formula. I was building something real, and they couldn't see it. Then came the betrayal I never saw coming. Emma called me one Tuesday afternoon, her voice shaking with anger. "You need to know what Dad's doing," she said. "I overheard him on the phone with Mr. Peterson." My father had secretly contacted the lawyer, trying to buy the land directly from Grandma's estate. He'd offered a huge sum of money, claiming I was mentally unstable and incapable of managing the property. He'd even tried to get Mark to sign a statement saying I was incompetent. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. This was my inheritance, the only thing Grandma left specifically for me, and my own father was trying to steal it. He wasn't just doubting my abilities anymore. He was actively working to destroy me. When I confronted him, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "You're wasting everyone's time with this challenge nonsense," he said coldly. "I'm doing what's best for the family. That land could solve all our problems." "You mean your problems?" I shot back. "This was never about me being useless. It's about you being broke." His face went red, but he didn't deny it. That's when I decided to fight back. I called Mr. Peterson immediately and explained what I'd discovered. To my relief, he'd already rejected Dad's offer and documented everything. "Your grandmother anticipated this might happen," he told me. "She left very specific instructions. Nobody can purchase or claim that land except you, and only after you complete the challenges." Together we decided to go on the offensive. Mr. Peterson would file a formal complaint about my father's interference, making it part of the legal record. More importantly, I'd make everything public. I wasn't going to let Dad operate in the shadows anymore. I wrote a long post on social media, explaining exactly what was happening. I didn't name Dad directly, but I described the situation clearly. A family member trying to steal an inheritance, undermining a grandmother's final wishes. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people shared their own stories of family betrayal. Local news outlets picked up the story. Suddenly, I wasn't alone in this fight. People were watching now, and my father couldn't hide behind closed doors and private phone calls anymore. The legal battle that followed would be long and exhausting, but I was ready. Grandma's legacy was worth fighting for. The family exploded into chaos. What started as a private dispute became public drama that everyone had an opinion about. My mother-in-law, who'd always treated me like I wasn't good enough for her precious son, immediately sided with my father. She called me one evening, her voice sharp and condescending. "You're tearing this family apart over dirt and trees," she said. A real woman would put family peace above personal greed. I almost laughed at the irony. I wasn't the one being greedy. But try telling that to someone who'd already made up their mind about you. Family dinners became war zones. Cousins took sides. Aunts and uncles whispered in corners. Some people supported me, remembering how much time I'd spent caring for Grandma in her final years. Others thought I should just give Dad the land to keep the peace. Mark's family pressured him constantly to control his wife. My own mother stayed silent, too afraid of Dad's temper to defend me. I lost friends who thought I was causing unnecessary drama. Meanwhile, my business was growing despite all the chaos. Or maybe because of it. People wanted to support me to prove that I could succeed. Orders started coming in faster than I could fill them. One night, while searching through old boxes of Grandma's things that Mr. Peterson had given me, I found another letter. It was hidden inside a cookbook, tucked between pages of her famous apple pie recipe. My hands shook as I unfolded the yellowed paper. "If you're reading this," it began, "then you've discovered what I suspected. Your father will try to take everything from you." She'd known. She'd seen it coming years before she died. Grandma explained that Dad had always been jealous of her wealth, constantly asking for money to cover his bad decisions. She'd helped him many times, but he never learned, never changed. "I'm setting up safeguards," she wrote. "Legal protections that will ensure nobody can take this land from you, no matter what they try. But you must complete the challenges. They're not just tests. They're lessons you need to learn before you can truly own your legacy." She'd included detailed information about accounts I didn't know existed, legal documents Dad knew nothing about, and evidence of his previous attempts to manipulate her into changing her will. Grandma had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. Reading her words, I felt her presence so strongly it was like she was sitting beside me. I wasn't alone in this fight. I never had been. The courthouse steps felt like a mountain as I climbed them for the hearing. Dad had officially filed paperwork trying to declare me incompetent to manage the land. His lawyer argued that Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she created the challenge requirements. It was an ugly, desperate move, but I was ready for it. Mr. Peterson had prepared our case carefully. We had medical records proving Grandma was mentally sharp until her final day. We had her letters showing clear intent. We had documentation of Dad's financial problems and his history of pressuring Grandma for money. Most importantly, we had evidence of my business success. In just 4 months, I'd built a thriving company with real revenue and satisfied customers. I sat in that courtroom, wearing a suit Emma helped me pick out, and listened to my father's lawyer paint me as an irresponsible, naive woman playing at business. Then it was our turn. Mr. Peterson calmly presented evidence of everything Dad had tried to do. The attempted backdoor purchase, the harassment, the manipulation. The judge's expression got darker with each revelation. When it was over, she ruled in my favor immediately. Dad's petition was denied, and she issued a restraining order preventing him from interfering with Grandma's estate or my business. Walking out of that courthouse felt like flying. With the legal threat handled, I threw myself completely into my business. The garage wasn't big enough anymore, so I rented a small commercial space. Nothing fancy, just 800 square feet with good lighting and room for storage. I hired my first employee, a young woman named Jessica who was trying to work her way through community college. Together we filled orders, improved formulas, and expanded the product line. My confidence grew with every sale, every positive review, every repeat customer. I wasn't just playing at business anymore. I was building something real, something sustainable, something mine. But the closer I got to success, the more desperate my father became. He couldn't take legal action anymore, so he turned to sabotage. He started spreading rumors in our small town, telling people my products weren't safe, that I was using cheap ingredients and lying about being organic. He'd go into stores that carried my products and loudly complain to other customers. "My daughter makes this garbage," he'd say, holding up my lavender lotion like it was radioactive. "She's just trying to scam people to get attention." His efforts were pathetic but effective. I lost several retail accounts because the owners didn't want the drama. Orders slowed down for 2 weeks. But then something unexpected happened. People started defending me. Customers who loved my products began posting reviews online, sharing their experiences, calling out the harassment I was facing. A local blogger wrote an article about my situation, framing it as a story of perseverance against family toxicity. Orders didn't just recover, they exploded. I couldn't keep up with demand. What Dad meant as destruction became free publicity. Every time he tried to tear me down, more people rallied to support me. I had to hire 3 more employees and upgrade to a larger space. Within 6 months of starting, my business was legitimately profitable. But I started seeing the bigger picture too. The real enemy wasn't just my father. It was the entire system that had kept me small and dependent for so long. Mark's mother had been manipulating him for years, filling his head with ideas about what a wife should be and do. She'd convinced him that my ambitions were threatening to our marriage, that a good wife focused only on home and husband. My father had controlled my mother the same way, making her afraid to have opinions or defend her children. I'd been raised in this environment, taught that my value came from serving others, never from standing on my own. But Grandma had seen through all of it. Her challenges weren't just about business. They were about breaking free. Mark and I finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for months. I came home late one evening after a long day at the workshop, and he was waiting at the kitchen table. No TV, no phone, just sitting there with a serious expression. "We need to talk," he said. I braced myself for another lecture about how I was neglecting our marriage for my business. Instead, he surprised me. "My mother called today," Mark began slowly. "She wanted me to give you an ultimatum. The business or our marriage." He looked down at his hands. And I realized I've been letting her control me my whole life. Control us. He admitted that his mother had been poisoning his thoughts about me for years, making him doubt my capabilities, convincing him that I needed constant supervision and guidance. She'd been the one pushing him to withdraw financial support, hoping I'd fail and return to being the obedient housewife. "I'm sorry," Mark said, and his voice cracked. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have stood up for you instead of letting my family and your father tear you down." It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to erase months of betrayal. But it was a start. We agreed to try marriage counseling to work through the damage that had been done. For the first time in years, Mark actually saw me. Grandma's second challenge arrived exactly 6 months after the first, delivered by Mr. Peterson in a sealed envelope. I'd successfully built a profitable business, proving I could stand on my own financially. Now she wanted something different. The letter explained that I needed to complete a charitable project within the next 4 months, something that would directly benefit our community and honor her memory. It couldn't just be writing a check. I had to create something meaningful, something that required personal involvement and sacrifice. The project had to demonstrate that I'd truly grown as a person, that wealth and success hadn't made me selfish. I knew immediately what I wanted to do. Grandma had always talked about how our town needed a community center, a place where kids could go after school and seniors could gather for activities. She'd dreamed of building one on her land, but never had the time or energy. I decided to make her dream real. I started planning a small community center on a corner of the inherited land, a building that would offer free programs for kids and seniors. It would have a kitchen for cooking classes, a garden for growing vegetables, and spaces for art and learning. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but it felt right. Of course, Dad and my mother-in-law tried to destroy the project before it even started. They couldn't attack me legally anymore, but they had other weapons. Dad went to the town council, raising concerns about zoning and permits. He claimed the community center would increase traffic and decrease property values. My mother-in-law called every contractor I tried to hire, warning them that I was difficult to work with and wouldn't pay my bills. She spread rumors at her church that I was building the center as a vanity project, that I didn't actually care about helping people. They pulled strings with local officials, trying to get my permits denied or delayed. For weeks, it seemed like every step forward came with 2 steps back. But I'd learned something important during my first challenge. I wasn't alone anymore. Sarah helped me navigate the permit process, using her business connections to find honest contractors. Emma, despite Dad's anger, went to town council meetings to speak in support of the project. Even Mark showed up, standing beside me for the first time in months. Customers from my business volunteered their time, helping clear land and paint walls. The community rallied because they wanted this center. They saw what I was trying to build, and they wanted to be part of it. In a final, desperate move, Dad and my mother-in-law organized a protest at the construction site. About 15 people showed up, mostly their friends and people they'd guilt into supporting them. They carried signs reading "Stop Wasteful Spending" and "Respect Property Rights," even though it was my property and my money. Dad stood in front of news cameras, playing the concerned father role perfectly. "My daughter is throwing away her inheritance on this foolish project," he told reporters. Her grandmother would be heartbroken to see the family land used this way. That's when I decided to expose their real motivations. I'd kept quiet about Dad's financial problems, about his attempts to buy the land, about all the harassment and sabotage. But enough was enough. I called a press conference of my own. Standing in front of the half-built community center, I calmly explained everything. I showed documentation of Dad's debts, his attempted manipulation of Grandma's will, his efforts to have me declared incompetent. I revealed my mother-in-law's interference in my marriage and business. I laid it all out, not with anger but with facts. The public backlash against them was immediate and intense. The protest dissolved within hours. Their reputations crumbled as people realized the truth. 4 months later, I stood inside the completed community center and couldn't believe what we'd built. The walls were painted cheerful yellow, just like Grandma's kitchen used to be. The garden outside was full of vegetables and flowers, maintained by volunteer senior citizens who treated it like their own. Kids' artwork covered every available wall space. The place was alive, buzzing with activity and purpose. I'd completed Grandma's second challenge, but more than that, I'd created something meaningful. This wasn't just about proving I could do charity work. It was about giving back, about using resources to help others instead of hoarding them. On opening day, over 200 people showed up for the celebration. Sarah cut the ribbon. Emma gave a speech about community and resilience. Even Mark stood beside me, genuinely proud for the first time in years. Mr. Peterson attended, smiling widely as he watched kids run through the hallways. Dad wasn't there, of course. Neither was my mother-in-law. They'd been ostracized by most of the family and community after the truth came out. Mom had finally left Dad, moving into a small apartment downtown and slowly finding her own voice. Looking around at what I'd built, both the business and the community center, I realized I wasn't the same person who'd run crying from that while reading. I was stronger, more capable, more myself. The day came for the final reading, the moment when Mr. Peterson would officially transfer the land into my name. We gathered in the same conference room where this had all begun, but this time only a few people attended. Emma and Sarah sat beside me for support. Mark was there, quieter now, still working to rebuild trust. Mr. Peterson opened his briefcase and pulled out the deed. "Congratulations," he said, sliding the papers across the table. "You've completed all the requirements your grandmother set forth. The land is now legally yours." I held the deed in my hands, feeling the weight of 4 generations of family history. 100 acres of oak trees and rolling hills and clear streams. Land that had nearly torn my family apart, but instead had shown me who I really was. Dad made one last attempt to contact me that evening, leaving a voicemail that I almost deleted without listening to. But curiosity got the better of me. "I know you probably hate me," his voice said through the phone, sounding smaller than I'd ever heard it. "And you have every right to. I let money and desperation turn me into someone I don't recognize. Your grandmother was right about you. She always was." It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was acknowledgement. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back. Some bridges burned too thoroughly to rebuild. The hardest part came next, deciding what to do with my parents' relationship moving forward. Mom wanted to reconcile, to have family dinners again like nothing happened. Emma thought I should at least try. But I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or accepting toxic behavior back into your life. I met Dad for coffee one afternoon at a neutral location. He looked older, worn down by the consequences of his own actions. Most of his friends had abandoned him after the truth came out. His financial situation hadn't improved. He was facing bankruptcy. "I'm not going to help you financially," I told him clearly. "And I'm not going to pretend the last year didn't happen. You tried to destroy me." He nodded, staring at his untouched coffee. "I know. But," I continued, "if you genuinely want to rebuild some kind of relationship, it has to be on my terms. No more manipulation. No more trying to control me. And you have to make amends with Mom. It would take years, maybe decades, to heal those wounds. Some might never heal at all. But at least now I was setting boundaries from a position of strength, not weakness. My mother-in-law never apologized, never admitted wrongdoing. Mark eventually cut contact with her, choosing our marriage over her manipulation. It was painful for him but necessary. A year after Grandma's death, I stood on the highest hill of my land and watched the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The community center behind me buzzed with evening activities. My business had expanded to include 6 retail locations across the state. I'd hired 23 employees, most of them women who needed a second chance just like I had. The land that Dad said I was too useless to inherit had become the foundation for everything I'd built. Not because of its monetary value but because of what it represented. Grandma's faith in me. Her understanding that I needed to be pushed out of my comfortable cage to discover my own strength. Mark and I were doing better, slowly rebuilding trust through honest communication and therapy. Emma and I were closer than we'd ever been. Sarah had become one of my best friends and business partners. Mom was discovering her own independence, taking art classes and making her own decisions for the first time in 40 years. And me. I finally understood what Grandma had been trying to teach me all along. I wasn't useless. I never had been. I'd just been surrounded by people who needed me to believe I was so they could control me. Standing there on that hill, with Grandma's land stretching around me and the community center she dreamed of thriving below, I felt truly free for the first time in my life. If this story resonated with you, I hope it reminds you that your worth isn't determined by the people who doubt you. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property. It's the courage to prove everyone wrong, including yourself.